You think you know Babylon. This ancient city holds secrets that defy everything you learned in school. We are uncovering 28 of them, and by the end, your understanding of human history will be fundamentally changed. You have heard of the Hanging Gardens and the Tower of Babel, but these famous tales are merely the surface of a deep and mysterious world. What if those legendary gardens were never even in Babylon? What kind of civilization performed advanced brain surgery thousands of years ago? We are going to explore a place where beer was money, women were powerful tycoons, and mathematicians solved complex equations without a single symbol. This is a journey into the shocking and the surreal. Are you ready to have your perception of the past completely rewritten? Our journey begins with a story you thought you knew. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a breathtaking terraced paradise built by a king for his homesick queen. Yet a startling possibility now confronts us. What if this iconic marvel was never actually in Babylon? The physical evidence within the city itself is conspicuously absent. Despite decades of excavation, archaeologists have found no trace of the elaborate irrigation system such a garden would demand. No foundation stones, no definitive inscriptions. This absence has fueled a radical theory championed by scholar Dalley. Her research points not to Babylon but to the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, hundreds of miles to the north. She proposes that the gardens were the brainchild of the Assyrian king Sennacherib, a ruler known for his monumental building projects. Ancient cuneiform tablets describe his palace garden as a monumental feat of engineering, a place where exotic plants and fragrant trees were watered by a complex system of canals and aqueducts. Most compelling is the description of a revolutionary water-lifting device, a bronze spiral screw that could raise water from a river to the highest terraces with incredible efficiency. This was technology far ahead of its time. Later Greek historians traveling through a conquered empire may have simply attributed this wonder to the more famous city of Babylon, and the error stuck for centuries. So the very first secret we uncover completely rewrites the map. One of history's most famous landmarks might have been in the wrong city all along, a testament not to a Babylonian love story, but to Assyrian imperial ambition and engineering genius. This medical daring finds its most startling expression not in gardens, but in the human skull. Deep within the Babylonian ruins, archaeologists have unearthed bones that tell a silent, shocking story. These are human skulls with carefully drilled holes, and the most incredible part is the evidence of smooth, healed bone around the edges. This means the patients lived. They survived a complex surgical procedure known as trepanation, performed thousands of years ago. Imagine the scene. A person suffers a severe head injury, perhaps from a fall or in battle. Pressure builds inside their skull, threatening their life. A Babylonian healer steps in. Using a specialized bronze tool with a sharp, circular edge, they would have meticulously scraped and drilled through the living bone, a process requiring immense precision to avoid piercing the delicate brain beneath. This was not mere guesswork. It was a calculated medical intervention to relieve that deadly internal pressure, a practice that demonstrates a profound, practical understanding of human anatomy. But the reasons may have been as spiritual as they were physical. In a world where illnesses were often attributed to supernatural forces, a person suffering from seizures or severe mental distress might have been thought to be possessed by an evil spirit. Drilling a hole in the skull was seen as a way to create an opening for that malevolent entity to escape, a literal release of the demons tormenting the mind. So this single healed hole represents a dual reality. It is both a remarkable feat of early surgery and a window into a world where medicine and mysticism were inextricably linked. These Babylonian surgeons, with their bronze tools and their steady hands, were navigating the ultimate frontier, the human mind, with a courage that still resonates today. That same understanding of the body extended to a comprehensive system of healing, preserved on clay tablets that functioned as the world's first known pharmacopoeia. This was not a collection of random superstitions, but a rigorously organized medical text. It catalogued hundreds of remedies, each one a precise recipe. For a stubborn stomach ailment, a physician might grind a turtle shell into a fine powder and mix it into a glass of beer. For a wound, they would create a soothing poultice from mashed figs and tree resin, a natural antiseptic. These were not wild guesses. They were the result of careful observation and systematic testing, a true medical science recorded for future generations. The Babylonian approach to illness was surprisingly rational. A doctor would first diagnose the patient by observing their symptoms, then consult the text to find the appropriate treatment, and finally offer a prognosis for recovery. They even understood the concept of contagion, recognizing that some diseases could be passed from one person to another. This debunks the common myth that all ancient medicine was purely magical. While spiritual beliefs were part of their worldview, the core of Babylonian healing was a practical, methodical process. They saw the body as a system that could be understood and treated with the right combination of natural ingredients, laying a foundation for medicine that would last for millennia. But that practical, life-sustaining knowledge extended far beyond the clinic and into the very fabric of daily survival. In the shadow of the great ziggurats, the true currency of life was not gold or silver, but beer. Your daily wage for a long, grueling day of construction work or administrative duty was measured in liters of this fermented brew. This was not the thin, fizzy drink we know today. The standard ration was a thick, almost porridge-like substance packed with nutrients and calories, a complete meal in a jar. It provided the energy to move massive bricks and the hydration to endure the relentless Mesopotamian sun, all while being safe to drink, as the fermentation process killed harmful waterborne pathogens. The Babylonian economy literally ran on beer. There were even different grades and qualities, a clear social hierarchy reflected in your drink. Laborers received the basic, hearty brew to fuel their bodies, while officials and elites enjoyed refined, filtered varieties likely flavored with honey or dates. Think of it, a society where your bank account was a beer jug and your financial status was determined by the quality of your daily pint. This system reveals a profound secret about civilization itself. The great monuments of Babylon, its walls and temples that still capture our imagination, were built not just on mud, brick, and ambition, but on the steady, reliable flow of beer, the liquid foundation of an empire. While beer fueled the laborers, a different kind of power was being amassed in the quiet precincts of the temple. Shattering every modern stereotype of ancient women, Babylon was home to a unique and formidable class of female tycoons. They were known as the Nadatu women, priestesses of the highest status who lived in cloistered communities called gagums. Their lives were defined by a surprising rule: they were forbidden from marrying and having children. This was not a restriction meant to limit them, but rather a social contract that set them free. Freed from the traditional duties of family life, they were expected to dedicate themselves entirely to commerce and the management of vast wealth. And they did so with breathtaking success. A Nadatu woman did not simply tend to a small household plot. She was a captain of industry. She owned sprawling agricultural estates that produced barley, dates, and sesame oil on an industrial scale. She financed and managed massive textile workshops, overseeing the production of fine woolen garments that were traded across the empire. Most impressively, she acted as a banker, lending out large quantities of silver at interest to merchants and even to the king himself. These were not informal agreements. The proof of their power is etched into thousands of clay tablets, legal contracts that bear the distinct imprint of their personal seals. One such contract records a woman named Amat Shamash lending a staggering 30 shekels of silver to a merchant for a trading voyage, with a clear stipulation for repayment with interest. Another tablet shows Aristeia, a Nadatu, purchasing a prime field of 12 acres, a transaction she conducted entirely in her own name. These seals were their signatures, their legal identity, and they wielded them with an authority that rivaled any male merchant. So, while they lived apart from society, their financial influence reached into every corner of the Babylonian economy. They were not hidden away, they were central players, their wealth and independence protected by law and custom. This reveals a society far more complex than we often assume, one where a woman's path to immense power was not through a husband or a son, but through her own shrewd mind and the legal autonomy to build an empire of her own. This legal protection extended even into the most intimate corners of life, the marriage contract. Within the famed and often severe Code of Hammurabi, a startlingly modern concept was carved into stone. A Babylonian wife had the legal right to leave her husband. This was not a simple escape but a formal, no-fault divorce clause, and the grounds were remarkably specific. If a man neglected his basic duties as a husband, if he failed to provide conjugal rights or even abandoned his home and city, his wife was not trapped forever. She could gather her possessions, most importantly her original dowry, and return to her father's house. This was her financial safety net, her ticket to a new beginning. The process was just as revolutionary. She did not need to prove he was a monster, only that he had failed in his fundamental spousal obligations. Even more striking, if a husband publicly shamed his wife by falsely accusing her of adultery, the law offered her a clear and dignified exit. She could simply declare her innocence before the community and walk away from the marriage, taking her dowry with her. This was not a society of pure gender equality, of course. It was a patriarchal system, and the code contained many harsh, unequal punishments. Yet this single provision reveals a hidden layer of complexity. It acknowledged that a marriage was a contract with mutual responsibilities, and when one party broke that contract, the other had a legal form of recourse. It provided a crucial, if limited, shield for women against total powerlessness, ensuring that a wife was not merely property, but a person with a recognized legal standing and a path to reclaim her life. The financial and social contracts of Babylon were built on a foundation of mud, brick, and law, but its spiritual ambition reached for the heavens themselves. At the city's heart stood the Etemenanki, a name meaning the foundation of heaven and earth, a ziggurat so colossal it was later immortalized as the Tower of Babel. But its true scale is one of history's most contested secrets. Ancient travelers like the Greek historian Herodotus returned with tales that defied belief, describing a tower that soared to a staggering 1 stadium high, a measurement translating to over 600 modern feet. If true, this would have made it the tallest human-made structure on Earth for millennia. Yet the crumbling base that remains today tells a different, more earthbound story. Modern archaeologists have carefully measured its massive footprint, a square measuring roughly 300 feet on each side. From this foundation, they reconstruct a tiered pyramid, still immense and awe-inspiring, but likely rising to a height of perhaps 200, maybe 250 feet. So how do we reconcile the myth with the masonry? The answer lies not in failed engineering, but in triumphant symbolism. Building a structure of even this reconstructed height was a breathtaking feat of logistics and labor. Imagine the challenge of raising millions of baked mud bricks to such an elevation using only ramps, ropes, and human muscle. Each successive tier required a wider base and an exponentially greater volume of material. A tower approaching Herodotus's description would have been structurally impossible with the technology available, its own weight causing it to collapse into a mountain of rubble. For the Babylonians, the physical height was almost secondary. The ziggurat was a stairway, a physical connector between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. Its true magnitude was measured in its spiritual and political impact. By constructing this mountain at the center of their world, the Babylonian kings were not just building a temple. They were making a declaration of divine favor and imperial power, a statement so potent that its legend grew in the telling until the tower in the stories truly did scrape the sky. While the ziggurat reached for the heavens, Babylonian beliefs about what came after death descended into a realm of profound gloom. Their underworld, known as Urkala, was not a place of fiery punishment or glorious reward, but a land of silent, somber dust. This was the domain of the formidable goddess Ereshkigal, who ruled this shadowy kingdom not with malice, but with an unyielding and indifferent authority. To enter her realm was to undertake a journey of utter loss. The path led through 7 gates, each one a trial of stripping away. At the first gate, a traveler would be forced to surrender their royal scepter. At the next, their jeweled crown. Gate by gate, every article of clothing, every symbol of status, every cherished possession was taken, until the soul arrived in the great dusty hall of the dead, utterly naked and anonymous. In Urkala, the mighty king and the lowly slave were rendered identical, mere shades consuming dust and clay. There was no judgment for a life well lived, no weighing of the heart against a feather. The only thing that mattered was whether your family on earth remembered to pour out libations for you, offering sustenance to break the monotony of this eternal, gray existence. This stark vision reveals a secret about the Babylonian psyche. In a civilization so focused on law, commerce, and monumental achievement, their view of the afterlife was startlingly bleak. It was a complex, deeply pessimistic belief system that saw death not as a transition to glory, but as a dim, inevitable diminishment, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched fields of the Egyptians or the heroic feasting halls of the later Vikings. Their greatest fear was not damnation, but being forgotten. Even against the bleak backdrop of Urkala, the Babylonians forged a practical path for their loved ones. In the silent tombs beneath the city, archaeologists have uncovered a strange and poignant secret. Alongside the remains, they often find small, crudely shaped model boats made of simple clay. These were not children's playthings left as mementos. They were spiritual tools meticulously placed in the grave for a critical purpose. Babylonian belief held that a terrifying, subterranean river separated the world of the living from the dusty plains of the dead. This was not a symbolic barrier, but a literal, churning waterway that every soul had to cross. Without a vessel, the deceased would be trapped forever on the wrong shore, unable to complete their journey to the underworld. These humble clay boats were the solution, a form of ghost money paid to the ferrymen of the dead. They were intended as functional vessels, designed to magically transform in the spirit realm into a real boat capable of carrying its passenger across that final, dreadful divide. This practice reveals a deeply pragmatic side to their spirituality. They did not merely hope for a safe passage, they actively engineered it from beyond the grave, providing the necessary tool for the voyage. This concept of providing for the dead's journey is a powerful echo across ancient cultures. The Greeks, for instance, placed a coin in the mouth of the deceased to pay Charon, the ferryman of their own river Styx. This parallel shows a shared, fundamental human anxiety about the final transition and a universal desire to equip our loved ones for whatever comes next. In the quiet darkness of a Babylonian tomb, a simple clay boat was the ultimate act of care, a family's last gift to ensure a soul did not get left behind. That same practicality, etched into clay for the afterlife, was also used to navigate the frustrations of daily commerce. One of the most humanizing documents ever recovered from the ancient world is not a royal decree or a religious hymn, but a customer complaint. Around the year 1750 before the Common Era, a merchant named Nani had reached his absolute limit with a supplier named Nasir. He took a damp piece of clay and carved out his grievances in meticulous cuneiform, a message so full of indignation it has survived for nearly 4,000 years. We can read his words today, and they are wonderfully, hilariously relatable. Nani begins with the core issue, the substandard goods. he writes, "You said, I will give fine quality copper ingots to Gimelem. But you did not do what you promised. You gave ingots of poor quality." The frustration then escalates from a business transaction to a personal insult. He complains about the disrespectful behavior of Enasir's messenger, who treated him with contempt right in his own home. And then the final straw, the utter lack of customer service. He declares, "And though I have waited in your courtyard, you did not even bother to come out and see me." Can you picture the scene? A frustrated businesswoman standing outside a supplier's office, being ignored after receiving a bad batch of materials. The specifics are ancient, but the emotion is instantly familiar. This single clay tablet shatters the distance of millennia. It reveals that the people of Babylon were not just anonymous figures building ziggurats. They were individuals dealing with shady suppliers, feeling the sting of disrespect, and taking the time to write a strongly worded letter. Their world, for all its mystery, was built on the same bedrock of human interactions, where a good deal and a little common courtesy mattered just as much as they do today. The frustrations of a merchant like Nani were just one small part of a vast and unpredictable world. A world where the will of the gods was written not in words but in the very flesh of the world. For the most crucial decisions of state, from launching a military campaign to crowning a new king, Babylonian rulers turned to a secretive class of priests known as the Baru. Their sacred duty was extispacy, the art of reading the future in the entrails of a sacrificed sheep. Imagine a dimly lit temple chamber, the air thick with incense and anticipation. A perfect, unblemished sheep is presented, its life offered to the gods. The Baru, with practiced hands, would carefully remove the liver, this dark, complex organ seen as the seat of life itself. He would not glance at it casually. He would study it with the intense focus of a master codebreaker, for he believed every single feature was a deliberate sign from the divine. The shape of the gallbladder, the texture of the main lobe, the presence of any tiny protrusions or discolorations, each detail was a syllable in a message from the gods. This was not a vague or random superstition. It was a highly structured science, meticulously documented on detailed clay tablet manuals that functioned as field guides for prophecy. These tablets contained thousands of entries, cataloging possible configurations and their specific meanings. A long, thin gallbladder might predict a long and prosperous reign for the king, while a lobe marked with a peculiar notch could be a dire warning of an impending rebellion. The Baru was trained to cross-reference all these signs, building a complex, nuanced prediction from the physical evidence before him. This practice reveals a profound secret about the Babylonian mind. They saw the entire universe as a text, a book written by the gods where every natural object, from a sheep's liver to the flight path of a bird, contained a hidden message. Their desperate need to read this divine will, to find order in the chaos of existence, drove them to create one of history's most intricate and bizarre systems of divination. A system where the fate of empires literally rested in the palm of a priest's hand. This constant battle against invisible threats found its most chilling expression in the Udug-Hull Incantation series, a collection of texts that describe a world under siege from malevolent spirits. These were not just stories, they were practical manuals for survival in a universe teeming with supernatural danger. The primary antagonists were the Udug and the Asaku, demons born from the very darkness of the underworld. They were not mere metaphors for illness. In the Babylonian worldview, these entities were the direct cause of it. A sudden fever was the touch of an Asaku. A wasting disease was the work of an Udug draining a person's life force. But the most terrifying power attributed to them was the ability to reanimate the dead. A spirit could be forced back into its decaying body, creating a restless, hostile entity sent to torment the living. This was not the mindless zombie of modern fiction, but a specific, magical weapon used by sorcerers or arising from a spirit's own malevolence, a ghost physically bound to this world to spread misery. Standing against this darkness was the Ashapu, a trained exorcist who was part priest, part doctor, and part magical warrior. His toolkit was not one of physical medicine, but of powerful words and rituals. He would recite specific incantations, long, poetic spells that invoked the names of mighty gods to overpower the demon. One such incantation directly commands, "Be exorcised by heaven, be exorcised by earth," a call to the fundamental forces of the universe to enact his will. The rituals were multisensory experiences designed to overwhelm the spiritual senses of the demon. The Ashapu would create figurines of the offending spirits from clay or dough, then solemnly break them, symbolically destroying their power. He would use pungent incense like juniper to purify the air and sprinkle sanctified water to cleanse the afflicted person and their home. This reveals a secret dualistic layer to Babylonian life. Behind the orderly facade of law codes and mathematical precision lay a deep, pervasive fear of the chaotic supernatural. Every stroke of misfortune, from a personal illness to a community plague, could be the work of a demonic attack, requiring the specialized, magical intervention of the Ashapu to restore balance and protect the world of the living from the vengeful dead. This abstract battle against demons required a mind capable of incredible precision, a skill the Babylonians applied to a far more tangible realm. They were solving complex quadratic equations nearly 4,000 years ago, and they did it all without a single mathematical symbol. No plus signs, no equal signs, and certainly no mysterious X. Their genius was hidden in the very structure of their number system, a base 60 or sexagesimal system that still governs our lives today. Every time you check that an hour has 60 minutes or a circle has 360 degrees, you are using a Babylonian invention. This system was their secret weapon. It is far more versatile than our base 10 system, as 60 can be cleanly divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. This made complex fractional calculations, the bedrock of algebra, dramatically easier to manage. Their mathematical texts etched onto clay tablets read like intricate word problems. A typical problem might state, "I found a stone but did not weigh it. After I added a seventh of its weight and then an 11th of that new total, the result was 1 mina." What was the original weight of the stone? To solve this, a Babylonian mathematician would not set up an elegant equation. Instead, they would follow a meticulous step-by-step verbal recipe. The tablet would literally talk the reader through the calculation, instructing them to perform specific operations in a specific order. They had a firm grasp of what we call the Pythagorean theorem over a millennium before Pythagoras was born. A famous tablet, known as Plimpton 322, contains a table of numbers that form Pythagorean triples, sets of 3 whole numbers that perfectly describe the sides of a right triangle, like 3, 4, 5. They used this knowledge for practical tasks, such as surveying land after the annual flood of the Euphrates washed away boundary markers. They could calculate the length of a diagonal or the area of a field with stunning accuracy. This was not simple arithmetic. It was a form of abstract reasoning so advanced that it would be lost to the world for centuries, only to be rediscovered independently by later civilizations. The Babylonians manipulated abstract quantities, relationships, and squares of unknown numbers, holding these complex ideas entirely in their minds and describing them with words alone. They were thinking algebraically without any of the tools we consider essential for the task. Their mathematical mind was a powerful, silent engine, solving for the unknown long before a symbol was ever created to represent it. That same genius for solving abstract problems found spectacular expression in one of Babylon's most iconic landmarks, a structure whose color was a technological marvel in its own right. The Ishtar Gate was not merely decorated with blue bricks. It was a monument built from a specific, radiant hue that seemed to capture a piece of the sky itself. This was no ordinary pigment derived from plants or common minerals. The secret behind this brilliant blue was a sophisticated cobalt-based glaze, a chemical recipe so precious it was treated as a closely guarded state secret. To produce it, Babylonian artisans had to master a complex, high-temperature alchemy. They began by carefully selecting specific cobalt-rich ores, which were then ground into an exceptionally fine powder. This powder was meticulously mixed with silica, the main component of glass, and a flux to lower its melting point, creating a thick, colored paste. Each individual brick was then hand-dipped or painted with this mixture before being subjected to an immense, controlled fire inside a specialized kiln. The firing process was the most critical and delicate stage. The temperature had to be raised to a precise point, hot enough to vitrify the glaze, fusing it permanently to the clay brick in a glossy, glass-like coating, but not so hot that the colors ran or the bricks themselves warped or cracked. A single miscalculation could ruin an entire batch, wasting weeks of labor and valuable materials. This was not a simple pottery firing, it was an industrial-scale chemical reaction. A ballet of heat and chemistry performed thousands of times over to create the 8-mile-long processional way and the towering gate itself. The ultimate proof of their mastery is the color's incredible longevity. While the grand structure lay buried for centuries, fragments of these glazed bricks, when unearthed, still gleam with the same vivid, lapis-like blue that awed ancient visitors. This endurance is a silent testament to their advanced understanding of material science, an artistic and chemical achievement that allowed a king's ambition to literally be set in stone, in a color so resilient it has defied the ravages of millennia. Even the most precise land contract was protected by a supernatural deterrent. These were the Kudaru stones, boundary markers that recorded royal land grants to favored officials or priests. The true secret of these stones was not the dry legal text, but the horrifying curses that followed it. A new owner did not just gain a deed, they activated a divine security system. The inscriptions called upon the entire pantheon of Mesopotamian gods to unleash their fury upon anyone who dared to dispute the grant or move the boundary stone. The curses were meticulously specific and gruesomely creative. They invoked Shamash, the sun god, to scorch the usurper's fields into a cracked, barren wasteland. They begged Adad, the storm god, to blacken the sky and deny their land all rain. They summoned Nergal, the god of plague, to sweep through the challenger's household with a deadly pestilence. But the personal curses were the most visceral. One typical Kudaru pronounces that any man who breaks this agreement shall have his descendants vomit pus and drink urine. Another calls for the god to shatter his weapons, blind his eyes, and block his ears, rendering him utterly helpless and isolated. This was not merely a legal formality, it was a psychological weapon carved in stone. By placing these curses at the bottom of the document, the Babylonians fused law and religion into an unbreakable bond. The king's authority was one thing, but the wrath of the gods was an entirely different level of consequence. A person might be brave enough to challenge a human official in court, but would they risk the health of their children and the fertility of their land for generations? The Kudaru stone stood as a silent, permanent sentinel. Its power derived as much from the terror it inspired as from the royal seal it bore. It was a legal document that also functioned as a cursed object, ensuring that the law was enforced not just by men, but by the very gods themselves. That same impulse to impose order on the world, to map the abstract, extended far beyond mathematics and into the very shape of the earth itself. Deep within the clay tablet archives lies the Imago Mundi, the oldest known world map, created in the 6th century before the Common Era. Its secret is not its accuracy, but its profound symbolism. This is not a tool for navigation, but a diagram of cosmic belief. At the very center of the circular disc sits a single, dominant rectangle labeled simply Babylon. Radiating out from this epicenter are other regions depicted as small, labeled circles: Assyria, Urartu, and others, all arranged around the heart of the world. Encircling this entire known universe is a ring of water named the Bitter River, the great ocean that marked the absolute edge of existence. Beyond that, there is only blank space, the realm of primeval chaos and legendary beasts. This map was a declaration of identity, a cosmological statement carved in clay. It visually reinforced the Babylonian conviction that their city was not just a powerful empire, but the literal axis mundi, the pivot around which all of creation turned. Every political decision, every religious ritual performed at the top of the ziggurat was therefore an act of cosmic maintenance, sustaining the order of the world from its one true center. To look at this map was to understand your place in a divinely ordained hierarchy, with Babylon eternally, unquestionably, at the very heart of everything. Even the most absolute monarch was not above the law of the gods. Each year, during the chaotic and sacred days of the Akitu festival, the entire social order of Babylon was turned upside down in a secret ritual of shocking theater. The king, the most powerful man in the empire, would enter the inner sanctum of the temple of Marduk. There, before the statue of the city's chief god, the high priest would perform a stunning act of lèse-majesté. He would strip the king of his royal scepter, his crown, and his jeweled rings. Then, in a moment of profound humiliation, the priest would strike the monarch squarely across the face. The slap was not an act of random violence, but a calculated, symbolic blow. Its purpose was to remind the king that he was merely a mortal, a servant to the divine will of Marduk, and that his power was entirely conditional. But the ritual did not end with this public shaming. It then took an even darker turn. To complete the cosmic reset, a substitute was needed. The Babylonians would select a condemned criminal or a person with a mental disability from the streets. This unfortunate soul was then dressed in the king's own royal robes, given the king's scepter, and placed upon the throne. For a few fleeting days, this dummy king was treated as the sovereign. He was given fine food and wine, and his every word was obeyed as a royal command. He lived a brief, surreal fantasy of absolute power. This was the ultimate decoy, a human lightning rod designed to attract any bad omens or divine displeasure that the astrologers had predicted for the coming year. The substitute was absorbing all the negative cosmic energy meant for the true king. When the festival concluded, the charade ended with brutal finality. The substitute king was not simply led back to his cell. He was ritually executed, or in some versions of the ritual, stripped and sent into permanent exile. His death or removal was the final act of purification, a sacrifice that cleansed the real monarchy of all spiritual contamination and guaranteed another year of stability for the kingdom. This bizarre practice reveals a chilling secret of statecraft. The stability of the entire empire, with all its laws and armies, depended on this carefully staged, managed act of human sacrifice. It was a society so convinced of the fragility of its own order that it was willing to create a temporary, disposable monarch, a king for a day who would die so that the real king could continue to rule. But the most powerful spells and medical recipes were not always found in royal libraries. In a modest house in a residential district of Babylon, archaeologists uncovered a secret archive that belonged to a single man. His name was Akisha, and he was an exorcist. This was not a grand public institution, but a private library of over 400 clay tablets, all meticulously organized on shelves in his own home. This collection was his life's work, a comprehensive toolkit for battling the supernatural. It contained everything from complex incantations to drive out the Udug demons to precise medical instructions for treating a fever, alongside detailed astronomical observations used to determine the most auspicious times for his rituals. The secret here is one of decentralized knowledge. The great temples and palaces were not the sole repositories of wisdom. Crucial, specialized understanding was held by individual practitioners like Akisha and carefully passed down within families from father to son, forming a secret intellectual network that operated parallel to the major institutions. Think of Akisha not as a lone mystic but as a highly trained specialist, a doctor of the spirit world. His library was his professional reference, his family's most valuable inheritance. One tablet might be a centuries-old incantation copied perfectly from his grandfather's own tablet, while another could be his personal notes on a difficult case, a new observation about a demon's behavior added to the margins. This was a living tradition, refined and expanded with each generation. The survival of his library shows that the true intellectual strength of Babylon lay not just in its monumental ziggurats, but in the quiet, determined work of men like Akisha, who safeguarded a vast and potent knowledge in the unassuming rooms of their own homes, protecting the living from the dead with words written in clay. While Akisha studied the spirits, other Babylonian scholars were mapping the heavens with a precision that would not be surpassed for over 1,000 years. Their target was the synodic period, the complex rhythm of a planet's dance against the backdrop of the fixed stars. Take Jupiter, the king of their gods, Marduk. They did not merely note its movements, they calculated the exact number of days it took for the planet to travel from one point of opposition, where it rises as the sun sets, to the next. Their result was 397 days. Modern science, with all its telescopes and computers, calculates Jupiter's synodic period as 398.88 days. The Babylonians were off by less than 2 days. This was not a lucky guess. It was the result of a systematic, centuries-long project of observation. Generation after generation of temple scribes meticulously recorded the positions of the moon, the planets, and the stars on thousands of clay tablets, creating a massive celestial database. They then applied their sophisticated mathematical genius to these mountains of data, distilling the chaotic motions of the sky into predictable numerical patterns. They developed advanced computational techniques, using a form of mathematical step functions to account for the variable speeds of planets in their orbits, allowing them to predict lunar eclipses and planetary conjunctions with remarkable reliability. This was not pure science for its own sake, of course. It was driven by the belief that the gods communicated their will through the stars, and that by reading the sky, one could forecast the fate of the king and the kingdom. Yet in their desperate need to divine the future, they accidentally invented a powerful form of empirical science. They demonstrated that the universe, for all its divine mystery, operated on mathematical principles that could be observed, recorded, and predicted. This secret knowledge, locked in clay for millennia, was the true foundation upon which all later astronomy was built, a legacy of numbers written in the stars. That same cobalt blue of the Ishtar Gate served as a backdrop for a silent stone menagerie. Lining the processional way were over 120 magnificent beasts, each one a snarling lion, a powerful bull, or a mythical dragon. But these were not hand-carved masterpieces chiseled from single blocks of stone. Their true secret was an innovation in mass production, an ancient form of three-dimensional printing. Each animal was a giant puzzle, assembled from dozens of individual, pre-molded glazed bricks. The genius was in the design phase. Master artisans first created a full-scale model of the entire relief, perhaps sculpted in clay. This model was then carefully sectioned off into a grid, with each square representing a single brick. For every brick in the grid, a reusable mold was carved. This was the heart of the system. Instead of a sculptor painstakingly carving the curve of a lion's mane 120 times, a laborer could press wet clay into the designated mane mold, creating a perfect, identical copy every time. The logistical challenge was staggering. Think of the coordination required. A single lion required 60 or more specially shaped bricks. Each brick had to be molded, dried, glazed with that precious cobalt or gold-colored enamel, and fired in a kiln, all without losing its unique identity. Then came the assembly, a task like building the world's most heavy-duty, sacred jigsaw puzzle. The builders, working from detailed plans, had to place every single brick in its exact predetermined position. One brick out of order, one mold misidentified, and the majestic lion would become a glitched, unrecognizable monster. The seams between the bricks were even incorporated into the design, often following the natural lines of the animal's musculature to make the joins less visible. This was art as a precise industrial science. It reveals a civilization that understood the power of standardization and modular design to achieve a monumental goal. The roaring lions of Babylon were not just symbols of royal power, they were triumphs of logistics, their very existence proof that the Babylonians could orchestrate 1,000 small, perfect actions to create a single, breathtaking whole. The secrets of Babylonian mathematics are not confined to abstract theory. They are physically preserved on a palm-sized slab of clay known as Plimpton 322. This tablet, created around 1800 before the Common Era, is not a simple ledger or a random list. It is a meticulously organized table of numbers, and for decades its true purpose was a complete mystery. We now understand these numbers are Pythagorean triples, sets of 3 whole numbers that perfectly describe the sides of a right triangle. The first column lists values for the diagonal, what we call the hypotenuse, while the second and third columns correspond to the 2 shorter sides. One row gives us the numbers 119, 120, and 169. Check the math yourself. 119 squared plus 120 squared equals 14,161 plus 14,400, which is 28,561. And 169 squared is also 28,561. It is a perfect match, a right triangle defined by whole numbers, and the tablet contains 15 such sets, growing progressively more complex. So what was this table actually for? Was it merely a teacher's aid, a set of practice problems for apprentice scribes to learn the relationship between the sides of a field? Or does it hint at something far more profound? The triples are not listed haphazardly. They are arranged in a precise order based on the ratio of the sides, suggesting the Babylonians were exploring a concept of trigonometric ratios, a theory of number relationships for its own sake. The true, staggering secret of Plimpton 322 is not just that it contains these triples, but that it demonstrates a systematic, investigative understanding of them a full millennium before the Greek philosopher Pythagoras was even born. This was not just applied geometry for measuring fields, it was a foray into the pure, abstract beauty of mathematics itself, a secret formula for right angles hidden in plain sight on a piece of dried mud. Even the simple roll of the dice was a conversation with destiny. In the royal tombs of archaeologists discovered elegant game boards inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli, known today as the royal game of This was not merely a diversion for bored nobility, it was the board game of the gods, a spiritual map disguised as entertainment. Thanks to a remarkable cuneiform tablet discovered by British Museum curator Irving Finkel, which lays out the rules written by a Babylonian scribe, we can now play this ancient game and understand its profound secrets. The board itself is a symbolic pathway, a representation of the soul's perilous journey through life and into the afterlife. Each player had 7 tokens, and the goal was to move them along the 20 squares, navigating a course filled with divine intervention. Certain squares were perilous, sending a player's piece back to the start, a setback mirroring the sudden misfortune sent by a displeased god. But the most critical spaces were marked with a beautiful rosette design. Landing on one of these special squares was not just a lucky break, it was a moment of divine favor and spiritual rebirth, allowing the player to gain an extra turn or perhaps even a form of divine protection for their journey. The game was a race, but the true opponent was not the person sitting across from you, it was fate itself. Every throw of the 4-sided pyramidal dice was a revelation of divine will, a tiny, randomized omen. Can you imagine the tension, the feeling that you are not just playing a game, but actively participating in a microcosm of your own spiritual existence? This reveals that for the Babylonians, there was no clear line between the sacred and the secular. Even their leisure was a ritual, a way to practice navigating a world governed by the whims of the gods, where a single lucky roll could mean the difference between spiritual progress and being sent back to the beginning. But that same legal code, famous for its eye for an eye justice, applied its brutal logic even to the healer's art. Carved into the black diorite pillar of Hammurabi's laws is a clause that would make any physician's blood run cold. It states that if a doctor operated on a nobleman with a bronze lancet and caused the nobleman's death or the loss of his eye, then the doctor's own hands were to be cut off. This was not a vague threat, it was a precise, terrifyingly specific form of professional accountability. The punishment was not a fine or imprisonment, but the permanent removal of the very tools of his trade, a life-ending sentence for a surgeon. This law created an immediate and powerful incentive structure. A doctor would not simply take any case that came his way. He would be forced to perform a grim calculus assessing the severity of the wound, the patient's strength, and his own surgical skill before ever picking up a blade. He had to be absolutely confident in his ability to succeed, because the price of failure was not just a damaged reputation, but the literal loss of his livelihood and his physical capability. This brutal system, in effect, created a primitive but powerful form of medical specialization. A physician would naturally gravitate toward the procedures he knew best, the ones where his experience guaranteed a higher chance of success. He would refer away or simply refuse the most dangerous, uncertain operations, those where the risk to the patient, and therefore to his own hands, was too great. This was a society that demanded absolute competence from its professionals, enforcing it with the most direct consequence imaginable. It reveals a stark, pragmatic understanding of cause and effect, a belief that the weight of a mistake should be borne directly by the one who made it. While we may shudder at the cruelty, we cannot deny the chilling efficiency of a system where a surgeon's most valuable assets, his own two hands, were the collateral for every single operation he performed. While the Nadatu of Babylon were building their commercial empires, a different kind of secret society flourished just a short journey up the Euphrates River. In the sacred city of Sippar, dedicated entirely to the sun god Shamash, lived a unique and disciplined order of women. These priestesses were also called Nadatu, but their lives were governed by a far more rigid and secluded rule. They dwelled within a walled compound known as the Gagum, a cloistered world cut off from the bustling city, where their entire existence was dedicated to the service of their radiant deity. Their primary duty was a perpetual, silent prayer. They were not merely caretakers of the temple, they were its spiritual engine, maintaining a constant, ritual connection to Shamash to ensure his life-giving light continued to rise each day and his divine justice prevailed over the land. This was a life of extreme religious focus, but it came with a surprising form of power. Freed from the demands of marriage and family, these women became the chief executive officers of the sun god's vast earthly holdings. They managed enormous agricultural estates that fed the city, oversaw sprawling herds of livestock, and controlled lucrative workshops that produced textiles and other goods. Their authority was absolute within their domain, and it was an authority backed by a rare and formidable skill. The Nadatu of Sippar were among the most literate people in all of Mesopotamia. In a world where most could not write their own name, these women were fluent in the complex cuneiform script. They used this skill not for poetry but for power. They personally read and approved every contract for the sale of barley. They signed off on every ledger recording the temple's wealth in silver, and they corresponded directly with merchants and officials. A clay letter from one Nadatu to another might discuss the price of wool in one paragraph and a point of religious law in the next. This fusion of deep piety and sharp business acumen made them indispensable. They were the keepers of both the god's treasury and his favor, proving that within the rigid structure of the temple system, a woman could ascend to a position of immense influence, her voice silent in the public square but thunderously clear in the account books that govern the kingdom's economy. That same reverence for the dead, so carefully expressed in clay boats and tomb offerings, presents us with one of the most profound puzzles of this ancient city. Where are the tombs of Babylon's greatest kings? We have the spectacular gold-laden burials of Ur, the monumental pyramids of Egypt, but the final resting places of legendary rulers like Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar II have vanished without a trace. No grand, intact royal tomb has ever been discovered within the city's boundaries. This absence is a gaping hole in the archaeological record, a silent mystery where we expect to find the most opulent evidence of their power. One theory suggests these kings rejected ostentatious display in death. Perhaps they were interred in simple, unmarked crypts deep beneath their own palace floors, a practice known from other Mesopotamian sites. Their eternal slumber would then be guarded not by towering monuments, but by the very seat of their earthly power, hidden in plain sight. Another, more radical idea is that they were cremated, their ashes scattered to the winds or the river, a practice that would leave almost no archaeological evidence. This would be a stunning departure from the traditional Mesopotamian belief in the physical needs of the body in the afterlife, or perhaps the truth is more tangible. Their tombs, filled with immeasurable wealth, were simply looted clean in antiquity, their contents scattered and their locations forgotten over the centuries. The most tantalizing possibility is that they still lie hidden, perfectly preserved but inaccessible, buried deep beneath the modern water table that has risen around the ruins of Babylon. They could be waiting in waterlogged chambers, their treasures intact but their discovery requiring technology we do not yet possess. This is not just a missing grave, it is the missing heart of Babylonian royalty, a secret that keeps the greatest kings of this empire forever just beyond our reach. A lunar eclipse did not just darken the moon, it threatened the very life of the king. This was the core belief that powered the Babylonian astronomical diaries, a unique and sprawling project that fused the heavens with the earth. For centuries, temple scribes did far more than just track planets. They created a unified log of reality, meticulously recording celestial events on the same clay tablets as the price of barley, the level of the Euphrates River, and the latest political news from the palace. A single diary entry might note the position of Jupiter in the morning sky, then immediately state that the price of dates had doubled, and conclude with a report of an ambassador's arrival from a rival kingdom. The secret here was a radical form of political science. The Babylonians were not simply observing two separate worlds, they were documenting what they saw as a single, interconnected system. They believed the gods used the sky as a divine chalkboard, writing messages about the future of the state in the language of stars and planets. A lunar eclipse was the most dreaded omen of all, a direct celestial attack on the monarch that often forced the king to take a humiliating but life-saving precaution. To confuse the evil portent, a substitute king would be placed on the throne, a commoner who would absorb the predicted death, while the real ruler hid in the shadows until the danger passed. A strange alignment of Mars and Saturn, however, might be interpreted as a warning of impending invasion, prompting the military to strengthen border defenses. The astronomers who compiled these diaries were therefore the most crucial intelligence analysts in the empire. They were not stargazers in ivory towers, but key advisors whispering in the king's ear, translating the motions of the heavens into actionable political and economic strategy. In their world, the fate of a harvest and the fate of a dynasty were written in the same sky, and to read the stars was to govern a kingdom. The same chemical genius that created the radiant blue of the Ishtar Gate was applied to a far more ephemeral art. Cuneiform tablets reveal a secret industrial scale of perfume production, a luxury industry operating with the efficiency of a modern factory. These were not small, handcrafted vials for the royal family alone. The texts describe recipes for producing perfumes by the vat load, with one formula calling for vast quantities of myrrh and cypress, fragrant resins and roots imported from distant lands like Arabia and the Levant. This was not a cottage industry, it was a major economic enterprise. The process itself was a sophisticated alchemy. Babylonian perfumers mastered techniques like enfleurage, where fragile flower petals were pressed into layers of fat to capture their volatile scents, a method that would not be widely used again until 19th century France. They also utilized early forms of distillation, heating ingredients with water in specialized, sealed vessels to separate and capture the essential aromatic oils. This required specialized equipment, ceramic stills, and large fermentation vats that speak to a standardized, large batch production. Can you picture the scene, a workshop filled with the heady aroma of a dozen different vats, each one steeping a different combination of exotic ingredients, all under the watchful eye of a master perfumer? This secret reveals Babylon as a powerhouse of luxury goods, a center of trade and chemical innovation that catered to the elite's deepest desires. The demand for these scents created international supply chains, driving merchants across deserts and seas to bring the raw materials of desire back to the city's bustling workshops. In the quest for beauty, the Babylonians built one of the world's first known chemical industries, proving that their ambition was not just to build monuments, but to capture the very air of luxury itself. The final secret of Babylon is not buried in its ruins, but alive in the rhythm of our own world. For centuries, its legacy was distorted, recast as a cautionary tale of sinful pride and decadent excess by biblical and classical writers who saw it as a rival to their own power and faith. The magnificent Ishtar Gate was reduced to a mere symbol of corruption, its true nature lost beneath this layered propaganda. Yet the reality is that our modern civilization is built upon a foundation of Babylonian genius, a hidden inheritance we use every single day. Every time you glance at a clock, you are using their base 60 system. The reason our hour is divided into 60 minutes and each minute into 60 seconds. When you navigate using a 360-degree circle, you are applying a Babylonian mathematical convention that has perfectly mapped our world for millennia. Our very concept of a universal, written law code, one that applies to all citizens, finds its earliest known ancestor in the stele of Hammurabi. The 7-day week, a cycle that structures modern life across the globe, finds a direct parallel in their astrological observations of the 7 celestial bodies. The greatest surprise, after uncovering 27 secrets of gardens, medicine, and power, is this final revelation: Babylon never truly fell. A part of it simply went underground, its foundations so thoroughly woven into the fabric of our timekeeping, our laws, and our science that we forgot where they came from. The city of sin was, in truth, a city of profound innovation, and its greatest secret is that it never left us. It lives on, hidden in plain sight, in the very way we measure our days and order our world. This journey through the shadows of Babylon has revealed a civilization of staggering complexity and innovation. We started with the very ground shifting beneath our feet, learning that the legendary Hanging Gardens were likely a magnificent Assyrian marvel wrongly credited to Babylon for centuries. We peered into the minds of surgeons who performed intricate brain operations with bronze tools, their patients surviving thanks to a blend of medical skill and spiritual belief. We met the Nadatu women, powerful priestesses who defied every stereotype by building vast commercial empires as bankers, landowners, and tycoons, their authority etched into legal contract. We uncovered a society that ran on beer as its primary currency and solved complex quadratic equations without a single mathematical symbol, their genius preserved on humble clay tablets. From the mass-produced glories of the Ishtar Gate to the chilling ritual of the substitute king, each secret has painted a picture of a world both alien and strangely familiar. Babylon was not merely a city of myth and biblical sin, but a real, pulsating hub of law, science, and commerce, a place where women held financial power, mathematicians explored abstract concepts, and doctors navigated the human brain. Its secrets continue to astonish because they force us to rewrite our understanding of ancient history, revealing a level of sophistication we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Which of these 28 secrets surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history's mysteries, do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more journeys into the past.